Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Chrissy Neiser. I'm the MDOT MBA Administrator and Governor Larry Hogan's Highway Safety Representative. We appreciate you joining us today as we move into the long holiday weekend as we talk about the critical issues of drunk and drug driving. We know that as the number of vaccinated Marylanders increases, everybody's eager to be out and celebrating this 4th of July weekend with family and friends and a renewed sense of independence to be out there celebrating. But we also want to make sure that while you're out there celebrating, that you do so safely. We know making the wrong choice of being an impaired driver can cause that good time to come to an abrupt and unfortunately sometimes to a tragic end. Before I thank today's speakers or introduce today's speakers, I want to thank the staff at the Waterloo MSP Barrack for their support for this event. I'd also like to thank Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, a constant partner in our effort to eliminate impaired driving fatalities, and certainly our law enforcement partners throughout the state. We're all grateful for your tremendous commitment, and we all share the same goal of reaching zero fatalities on our roadways. Our first speaker is Lieutenant Colonel Roland Butler, who's Chief of the Field Operations Bureau of the Maryland State Police. We're 8 years into a partnership between MDOT and MSP's targeted law enforcement program known as the State Police Impaired Driving Reduction Effort, or better known as SPIDER. The SPIDER team has worked tirelessly to save lives since its inception, and we're proud of the work that they've done. Please welcome Lieutenant Colonel Roland Butler.
Good morning. Thank you, Ms. Neiser. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Roland Butler. I am the Chief of the Field Operations Bureau for the Maryland State Police. It is my honor to represent Colonel Jerry Jones and the men and women of the Maryland State Police today. I'm also honored to stand here with my distinguished public safety colleagues. Together, we're focused on saving lives and reducing injuries. There are no excuses for the tragic loss of life stories that are here with us today and around our nation. I am in awe of the strength of surviving family members and friends that come here every year to share their story with us. We join you in your commitment to bring home the message to those who continue to disrespect life and continue to drink and drive. Unfortunately, impaired drivers continue to harm our highways and endanger the lives of others. I can assure you every state trooper on patrol is on alert for impaired drivers. Today we are joined by members of a specialized team of state troopers, the SPIDER team, the State Police Impaired Driving Reduction Effort. Since their inception in 2013, they have focused solely on this deadly driving offense. Through their increased efficiency, expertise, and mobility, they're able to target specific areas for DUI enforcement where that enforcement is needed the greatest, while helping work towards the department's goal of reducing drunk driving deaths and injuries. This holiday weekend, they will be out in force. Year to date, Maryland State Troopers have arrested over 3,300 drunk and drug drivers. This is an increase of over almost 30% this time last year. As law enforcement, the most challenging part of the job is to deliver notification to a family member that your loved one is not coming home. It's even more painful having to explain that it was a drunk driver that was responsible for your loss. As we continue to work towards zero deaths, know that every police officer in this state is working towards the same goal. Our focus every day is to drive down the number of preventable injuries and deaths that occur on our highways due to impaired drivers. With more motorists on the roadway and traveling this holiday weekend, it's imperative we get the message out about the dangers associated with drinking and driving. We know the facts. We know alcohol and drugs negatively affect the person's ability to operate a vehicle. We know impairment of any kind impacts the decisions that are made when you're behind the wheel. Bottom line, we know impaired drivers can potentially take innocent lives, yet people continue to violate these laws. Our troopers work alongside partners throughout the state to combat impaired driving. We continue to explore innovative ways to cast the widest net possible to catch these violators. Thanks to funding from the Maryland Department of Transportation's Highway Safety Office, the SPIDER DUI team continues to work towards zero deaths while increasing the odds of catching drunk drivers using the Mobile Breath Alcohol Testing Truck, or MBAT. This vital piece of equipment assists law enforcement agencies statewide. The truck is equipped with intoximeters, as well as expert personnel to operate the instruments on the vehicle. This allows us to process DUI arrests more efficiently at the scene of these incidents. Working with our public safety partners, the Maryland State Police will continue to make a difference and are committed to removing what are undoubtedly some of the most dangerous drivers from our roadways. I'd like to recognize those of you who have become advocates supporting the victims of this violent crime. The profound contributions of Mothers Against Drunk Driving have helped many cope with the loss of a loved one. Thank you for your round-the-clock dedication and getting the message out. I'd also like to acknowledge the Washington Regional Alcohol Program for creating innovative programs such as the free cab ride services, and our partners at the National Transportation Safety Administration. Thank you for your advocacy, educational programs, and your partnership with law enforcement. Finally, our partners at the Maryland Department of Transportation Motor Vehicle Administration deserve recognition for the continued support of law enforcement, providing us with tools to continue to crusade to end these devastating tragedies. It is critical that we continue to increase awareness of the consequences of impaired driving as we work to increase the odds of apprehending those who drive under the influence of alcohol and/or drugs. Police in Maryland make over 22,000 DUI arrests each year, yet we are eager to remove even more of these dangerous drivers from our roadways. As we implement more sobriety checkpoints, more saturation patrols, and more high visibility campaigns, we strive to reach these individuals before they make the decision to get behind the wheel. We all know there is no excuse for drinking and driving, and it's preventable. There are far too many options available to prevent a tragic incident from occurring. Whether it's the free ride program, a cab, a ride-sharing service, designating a sober driver, the investment into saving lives is apparent. From public awareness to increased enforcement, we will do all we can to stop this needless tragedy. On behalf of our troopers working at 23 barracks across the state, we will do our very best to continue the efforts to enforce these laws and save lives this Independence Day weekend. Thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel Butler. We appreciate our partnership with you, Maryland State Police, and law enforcement statewide. Next, we're going to hear from a speaker who was personally impacted by an impaired driving crash. Oftentimes in the highway safety community, we talk about numbers, and those numbers are important, but even more important are the faces, the lives that are changed forever. And I'm really grateful, frankly, for those family members who offer their time to share those heartbreaking stories, because it's really those stories that make an impact. I'd ask you to please help me welcome Laura Murphy, who's going to share her personal story about an impaired driving fatality.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here today. My nephew Matthew was killed by an impaired driver when he was 12 years old. Matthew was loved by his family, and especially by his younger brother Patrick, who was 10 years old at the time of his death. The two of them were best friends. My two daughters, who were 9 years old and 7 at the time of his death, adored Matthew and Patrick. My husband and Matthew and Patrick's father are twin brothers, so our families are especially close. And our families spend a lot of time together. Whenever our family spent time together, the four cousins would end up pairing up and playing together. So it would end up being Matthew and my younger daughter Anna playing together, and my oldest daughter Myra and the younger cousin Patrick playing together. And it was very endearing to me that it would be Matthew, the older cousin, and the youngest cousin Anna playing together. Matthew and my youngest daughter Anna shared a very special bond. Anna looked up to Matthew as a big brother. Matthew and Patrick had been living in Pasadena, Maryland, and in the summer of 2017, they moved down to the Arnold and Bay Hills area. My girls were thrilled to be living closer to their cousins. And that fall, Matthew attended Magathie Middle School, and even though it was his first year attending that school, he was very quick to make a large group of friends. The crash occurred Sunday afternoon, April 22nd, 2018, around 3:20 p.m. My family and I had spent the day at a birthday party, And it wasn't long after we had arrived home that my husband received a frantic phone call from his twin brother. I had never heard my husband sound that way on the phone before. He was very frightened. He was very panicked. I couldn't even understand what he was saying on the phone because he was so upset. But the only thing I could understand him say was, "Matthew's been hit by a car, and I have to go pick up Patrick." And then he just ran out the door. I looked at my younger daughter, Anna, and I said, "Anna, I have to go help." And I dropped her off at a friend's house, and I just drove to Green Valley. Green Valley was the shopping center where we thought the crash had occurred. Green Valley is in a shopping center in the Bay Hills Shopping Center. Bay Hills is a neighborhood. Bay Hills Shopping Center is surrounded by sidewalks, surrounded by townhouses, surrounded by lots of families, lots of people walking their dogs. It's a very busy area. Initially, I thought the crash had occurred in the parking lot. So when I arrived, I drove into the parking lot, but I didn't see any police activity in the parking lot. But I did see police activity across the street out in the intersection. So I drove through the parking lot, parked my car, and ran over to the police and told them who I was. They pointed to my brother-in-law who was sitting on the curb. He was surrounded by yellow police tape, surrounded by police, and surrounded by many people from the neighborhood, which at first I thought was strange, but it was in the middle of the day, in the middle of a neighborhood, so there were lots of people out. I ran over to my brother-in-law. I gave him a hug, but he was very distraught. I didn't ask him any questions. I was very scared. I was very upset, and I didn't want to upset him anymore, and I didn't want to know any answers to the questions myself. So with one arm, I hugged him, and with the other arm, I was calling his sister to find out where they had airlifted my nephew. It was later, as I sat on the curb, I noticed that there were only police cars around. And I didn't notice any other cars, but I did notice a van. There was a van across the street down in a ravine. And I turned to my brother-in-law and I said, "Douglas," I said, "is that van the car that hit Matthew?" And then he just broke down in sobs. And that's when I realized that it wasn't a car that hit my nephew. It was a 5,000-pound work van that hit him. Matthew, age 12, Patrick, age 10, and his mother were walking on the sidewalk on a beautiful Sunday afternoon near the Bay Hill Shopping Center in Arnold when a van driving at a high rate of speed lost control, drove onto the sidewalk, hit Matthew, dragged him across the street, continued off the road and into a ravine and hit a tree. The man driving was passed out behind the wheel with a glass pipe in his hand with residue still in the pipe. He had no pulse and was given 2 doses of Narcan to revive him. He was found with cocaine and heroin in his possession. Before the crash occurred, the driver of the van was smoking marijuana at a friend's house, and someone at the house overdosed on cocaine. So they called the paramedics, and the driver of the van left the house before the paramedics came. And while he was driving, he took a hit of cocaine and immediately went into cardiac arrest. And that's when the van drove off the road onto the sidewalk and hit Matthew. Matthew's mother was behind her children and watched this entire scene unfold in front of her. She watched as her youngest son jumped into the bushes to avoid being hit, and she watched as her firstborn son was hit and dragged across the street. There was nothing she could do to rescue her children, and she was completely traumatized. This happened in a matter of seconds. There was nothing she could do. She was completely helpless. The witnesses at the scene had to call 911 and had to call my brother-in-law to the crash scene. At the crash scene, my brother-in-law arrived in time. while my nephew was still breathing. He was able to reassure Patrick that Matthew was still breathing, but he knew that he had to get Patrick away from that tragic scene. So at some point he had called my husband to come and get Patrick. By the time my husband arrived, they had already airlifted Matthew to the hospital. Matthew died at Johns Hopkins later that afternoon. His mother was not able to arrive before he passed away. His mother and 10-year-old brother witnessed the tragic crash and suffer from PTSD, and his father witnessed the tragic aftermath. And since the crash happened at 3:20 in the afternoon, there were several witnesses, including children, to the crash. My children had never experienced death before, and I did not know how I was going to tell them about the death of their cousin. Even adults can't comprehend the death of a child. My daughter Anna had lost her best buddy, and my daughter Myra had lost one of her closest cousins. It was difficult for my daughters to process his untimely death. My daughter Anna had lots of questions about God and about the driver of the van and about drugs. And my husband experiences his twin brother's emotions, so not only did he have to navigate his own grief, but he had to support his twin brother. And I also sought counseling from a grief counselor in order to help navigate my own emotions and the emotions of my family. My youngest daughter started seeing the guidance counselor at school, and in the spring of second grade, she told me that she thought that something bad was going to happen to her in either middle school or high school, and she couldn't make those feelings go away. So I started taking her to a therapist, and she saw that therapist for 2 years. Matthew's death and the trauma that followed was preventable. Matthew should be here today with his family. My mission is to honor the memory of Matthew by telling our family's story in hopes that others will make a different choice before getting behind the wheel while impaired. I want to thank you for your service and thank you for your efforts toward making our roads a safer place. Thank you for listening to my story. I'd like to turn this back over to Chrissy.
Thank you, Laura. Really want to, we appreciate you sharing your story. I think everybody that hears it, it touches us. But the importance is to take that feeling, the impact that occurred as a result of that crash, and really turn it into action so that these tragedies don't occur going forward. And so in order to do that, we're asking that everybody make a plan before you go out this weekend. We want to make sure that you have a safe and sober ride home so that there are not more needless tragedies like this one that you just heard today. More importantly, stick to that plan and never get in a car with anybody that's impaired by either drugs or alcohol. It is a personal responsibility every time you get behind the wheel. You have the control to make that decision. To make the decision to make sure that other drivers, as well as anyone else and yourself in the vehicle, are safe. It's also important that we remember pedestrian safety, and the story that was shared by Ms. Murphy is a perfect example of that. We are continuing to see a number of pedestrians killed on our roadways, but we're also seeing pedestrians that are impaired by drugs and alcohol. While you might make the decision not to be in that vehicle, it's also dangerous to be near a roadway when you're impaired. And so we ask, if you're walking home from your destination, please remember, use the sidewalks, use the crosswalks when they're available. Pay attention to your surroundings. Always wait for the walk signal. Look left, look right, and look back again. I know it's a simple message that we've talked about since an early age, but it really is critical to remember that before crossing the street. No matter how we get to our destination, we want everybody to arrive there safely. I want to again thank our Spider team for all of their efforts, as well as our other law enforcement partners throughout the state. Really, their dedication, day and night, no matter the weather conditions, they are out there protecting us. So I want to ask for each and every one of you to show them the same respect when they're on the roadway doing their enforcement. Please move over as it's safe to do so, and consider their safety on the road as well. They're out there putting their lives on the line for us. Again, thank you. We want to wish everybody a happy 4th of July. We hope everybody enjoys this year, but we want you to enjoy safely. Together, we can reach the goal of 0 fatalities on our roadways. Thank you.